Digital transformations are high-risk endeavors with some common failure points that often lead to those failures. But what exactly are those failure points and how can you avoid them? That's what I want to talk about here in today's video. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And digital transformations face a number of risks during any sort of project and during any sort of change initiative. There's some common patterns and threads that lead to failure, and there's also some common patterns and threads that lead to success. So what I want to do today is talk about those top 10 points of failure or causes of failure that you need to avoid before you embark on a digital transformation journey. Number 10 on our list is poor project management. If you don't have the right project governance controls and the overall project management in place, it's going to be easy to lose track of your scope. You're going to go over budget, timelines are going to slip, you won't have accountability for success in the project. A whole host of different symptoms result from not having good project management and good overall program governance. So one of the things you can do to avoid this risk is to make sure that you either leverage your internal PMO to set up a strong project governance and project management framework, or if you don't have that sort of competency in-house, make sure you leverage outside help, ideally independent third-party help, to help you through that whole project management, project governance workstream. One word of warning here is you don't want to defer to your systems integrator and assume that your systems integrator or your software vendor is going to handle the program management, because ultimately this is your project and the system integrator and software vendor are only addressing one workstream within that project. So you need a competency to manage the overall program, which includes but is not limited to the technology workstream. So make sure you have this project management and program governance framework in place to ensure that you avoid this risk on digital transformations. Number 9 on a list is poor risk mitigation, which is similar to the previous point about project management and project governance, but a little bit different. Technically, it is part of program governance, but the other part of it is the art of identifying and proactively addressing risks before they become such a problem that you can't overcome them. Most risks and most problems during digital transformations don't just happen overnight. They tend to percolate and bubble underneath the surface until they blow up and become a big problem that's very hard to reverse at that point. So what you need to address this is skilled outside resources that can call it like it is and help you recognize where the risks are, what mistakes you might be making without even realizing it, and helping you mitigate and get ahead of those risks before it becomes too late. Coming in at number 8 on our list is a lack of project planning and a lack of implementation readiness. And the reason this is such a big problem is because organizations tend to get really excited when they've defined a new roadmap, they've picked new technology, they've identified who their partners are going to be and helping them implement that technology, and they want to just jump in and start building and deploying stuff. And without having a clear vision of what it is you are going to accomplish, how you're going to get there, what your business processes are going to be, how you're going to manage the organizational changes, if you haven't addressed these and other aspects of your implementation early on, you're just going to start spinning your wheels and spending a lot of time and money on wasted efforts that you're going to have to rework later. So by taking the time up front to make sure that you have a solid project plan and an implementation, sort of a phase 0 for your implementation, that's going to allow you to take the time to make sure you have a solid blueprint and architecture for what this digital transformation is going to look like, how you're going to manage it, how all the different parties involved in the project are going to contribute to it, and ultimately help you be more successful and help you have more accountability and ownership for the overall digital transformation. Number 7 on our list is deferring too much to technology. It could be that you're deferring to one single ERP system to solve all of your problems and to sort of be that silver bullet to address your needs. Or it could be that you have multiple technologies you're trying to deploy and you're going to leverage those technologies to defer to them to identify what business processes you're going to deploy as an organization. Now, there's some truth and merit to this. You do want to leverage the capabilities, the competencies, and the workflows inherent in the technology, primarily so you don't have to customize the technology. But you also don't want to defer so much to the technology that you have no vision and no clarity of what it is you want the software to accomplish for you. One reason this is so important is because today's modern enterprise technology is so flexible when you compare it to 10 or 20 years ago that you have a multitude of different options and decisions that need to be made just to deploy the technology the way it was built. So if you don't have a clear vision of what it is you want to get out of the technology, and you're just assuming that the technology is going to tell you how to run your business, what'll end up happening is one of two things. One is you're going to be paying by the hour for consulting resources to wait for you to make your decision on how you want to run your business, or worse yet, the outside third parties, the consultants or the software vendors, will decide for you how you're going to run your business, whether or not it fits your longer term objectives or not. So the key here is to make sure that you have a clear vision of what you want to be when you grow up, which goes back to the previous point about having that solid project plan in the implementation readiness phase, the phase 0 of your project. This is one of those activities that you need to address in that phase to mitigate this risk. Another challenge and risk that digital transformation teams often face is an overdependence on the technical implementers, whether it be the value-added reseller, the software vendor themselves, or a system integrator. By deferring too much to them and assuming that they're going to run the project for you, you're missing out on a lot of things. First of all, you're missing out on the scope of what needs to happen to make your project successful outside the realm of technology. Systems integrators and software vendors are good at building technology and deploying technology, but they're not good generally at deploying organizational changes, process improvements, project governance and risk mitigation, overall architecture and integration. Those are things that need to be addressed by someone else other than the technical implementer. So the key here is to recognize that the technical implementer plays an important role in your digital transformation, but if you defer too much to them or solely to those parties, you're going to miss out on all the things that will ultimately make your project successful or more of a failure. The next risk to be aware of and to mitigate with your digital transformation is the phenomena of absorbing too much risk in too little time within your organization. You think about all the capabilities and the new functionality that software vendors are creating every day. And these oftentimes are light years ahead of where most organizations are, and they're only accelerating the pace of change in these technological capabilities. The problem is most organizations can't keep up with that pace of change. You may aspire to, you may be trying to be more nimble, more agile, and adapt to change more quickly, but for most organizations, they're stuck with inertia, they're stuck moving slowly as they have in the past, and while they'll try to change that during a transformation, oftentimes what happens is organizations will bite off more than they can chew during their digital transformation. They'll buy too many software modules or too many different technologies that they're not ready for or that they simply can't absorb in the time frame they've defined for their digital transformation. So the key here is to be self-aware and understand where you are as an organization and how quickly you can realistically change. And it's always a bit easier to speed up if you find that you're absorbing the change quicker than you thought, which, by the way, is extremely rare. We don't meet many clients, if any, that ever say that. But let's just say worst case scenario, you find that you're changing faster and you're absorbing the changes faster than you thought you could. It's always easier to speed that up than to try and take on and bite off more than you can chew and just setting yourself up for failure. So one of the keys is to be very deliberate about how much change you're willing to take and when you're willing to make those changes. The next risk to be aware of is unrealistic expectations. Too many organizations go into a transformation thinking that they can deploy technology in, say, 18 months, when in fact and in reality, they were never going to deploy those changes in 18 months. It was always going to be more like 3 years. Not because they didn't manage the project successfully or not because the project wasn't effective, but because most organizations have trouble changing. Back to my previous point about absorbing change within an organization. So when you have unrealistic expectations about how long a transformation will take and or how much time and money it's going to take, what ends up happening is you end up cutting corners later on when you realize finally that you have banked on these unrealistic expectations. So you find that you're behind schedule or you're going over budget, either you're trending outside the parameters of what plan you have in place, you end up cutting corners. You'll start to cut things like change management. You'll cut some of the training. You'll cut a couple cycles from conference room pilots. You'll not integrate those systems that are core or critical to your business. You'll start to make bad decisions, not because you want to, but because you have to, and you're boxed into a corner now because you've drawn a line in the sand for an unrealistic timeline and or an unrealistic budget. So the key here is to be realistic, go in with your eyes wide open, understand what exactly this transformation entails, and also understand realistically how quickly can you as an organization change and how realistically can you as an organization deploy different types of technologies and process changes. Number 3 on our list of digital transformation risks is poor change management. In other words, you don't manage the organizational changes that are happening as a result of your digital transformation, or you don't do so effectively. Oftentimes what happens is organizations think that by doing some training for end users shortly before go live, doing some newsletters and emails prior to go live will be enough to get people ready for change and to get them comfortable with the change. But the reality is that's only scratching the surface. You really need to do a lot of legwork prior to any of that stuff happening on the training and communication side. You need to do things like organizational design to define how people's jobs are going to change, how their roles and responsibilities are going to change. There's also change impacts, understanding how different people within the organization, different work groups, and different business units are going to be impacted by the changes entailed by this transformation. And another example is the organizational readiness assessment, really quantitatively and qualitatively measuring how ready the organization is for change and adjusting to and defining a change management strategy that addresses those organizational readiness results. So these are just a few examples of the things that need to be packed into your organizational change strategy. But the key here is to recognize that most organizations we work with, if not all of them, find that change management is more difficult than they ever thought it would be. So if you go in with that expectation and take the time up front early on to define your change strategy based on your needs, your culture, and where you're headed as an organization, that's going to make it more likely that you address this important critical success factor for a digital transformation. The second biggest risk we see with organizations going through digital transformations is a lack of internal alignment. In other words, we're not all on the same page, we're not rowing in the same direction, we're doing our own thing, or we're going in different directions, or we have different visions of what this project should be and what this transformation should entail for our organization. We have to get on the same page. It's normal to have some level of misalignment, but we have to get on the same page before we start the transformation. Otherwise, we're going to be spinning our wheels and wasting a lot of time and money and morale to try and get on the same page. And so if we can spend the time up front getting on the same page and having clarity around what it is we want to get out of this project, how we define success, what some of the key parameters and decisions are for the transformation, that's just going to make things a lot easier later on. So one way to look at this or think about it is if we take one step back, that's going to allow us to take 2 steps forward in the future. And rather than just rushing into the transformation when we have misalignment and instead focusing on really addressing that misalignment, the core root cause of that misalignment, that'll help us speed things up later on. That'll actually make our transformation go faster and cheaper than it would be otherwise. The single most important risk and the most damaging risk that organizations face when going through digital transformation is a lack of strategic clarity. They don't have a clear sense of what it is they want to get out of this transformation. They haven't defined how this digital transformation supports their larger and more strategic longer-term goals and objectives, and they certainly haven't made some of the key decisions that need to be made to set the parameters and guardrails for the transformation. So one of the first things we do when working with clients, in addition to helping select the right technology for them, is to also, as part of their implementation up front, is to define what it is they want to get out of this project. What are the strategic goals and objectives for this project, and how does that translate into specific parameters and criteria and guidelines for the transformation and the overall digital strategy? Instead, what typically happens is software vendors come in with their one-size-fits-all proposed project plan that doesn't align with what it is you're trying to accomplish strategically. So this process of reconciliation between your strategic goals and objectives and what your software vendor and your system integrators have proposed is a really important activity that will create a lot of tailwinds later on rather than causing you to face headwinds. So the number one thing you could do if you had to pick one thing on this list is make sure that you have strategic clarity and articulation of where it is you're headed and how this transformation will help you achieve those goals. So these are the top 10 biggest risks that you should be aware of in any digital transformation. For more information and best practices on how to make your digital transformation successful, I encourage you to download our Digital Transformation Report, which is an annual report that we publish each year with a number of best practices, software reviews and rankings, and other lessons to help you make your transformation successful. So I encourage you to download that white paper. I've included a link below, and I've also included a link to other resources that I think will help you through your digital transformation journey. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day. Number 8 on our list is poor project planning. Whoops, is that right? No, let me say that again. They'll buy too many software modules or too in the time frame they've defined for their digital transformation. So the key okay. So the heat, the what? It is hot. It's not what I meant to say. Okay. So one of the keys then is to recognize and be aware. Let me say that again. That wasn't 100% proper English, but we're gonna roll with that. We're gonna leave it. We're gonna let it. We're gonna say it was proper English. And if you haven't defined what it is you're trying to accomplish strategically, those two things aren't going to align. So really working through that process of reconciliating. That's not proper English, nor does that make any sense at all.